We see people that connect more with themselves. And that is joy. That is pure joy to witness that, because we live in this time right now on Earth where this is anyway happening. And it's wonderful. And the more people, can connect really with themselves again, the better the world will become. And then we can live more from the heart also, rather than, just from our brains. And that's for me the real bliss in all this.
You're listening to A New Way of Living with Dan Voss, inspiring you to a new life of breathwork, cold therapy, and plant medicine. In this week's episode, my guest is Philipp von Holtzendorff-Fehling. Philipp is a coach, conscious entrepreneur, and energy healer. In parallel to a successful international business career, he constantly worked through the barriers that prevented him from truly being his true self. With that, he started to also see energy fields and develop his unique skills as a healer. And he went through 2 decades of training in shamanic and other energy healing practices. During his business career, he worked as an executive for several well-known companies, including T-Mobile International and T-Mobile US, where he served as vice president. I'm having Philipp on the podcast because he has extensive knowledge and expertise in the areas of quantum energy and quantum healing. I encourage you to listen to this episode with an open mind and an open heart, and approach it with wonder and childlike curiosity, because it is really fascinating stuff. I learned a ton from this conversation, and I hope you do as well. But first, a word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Our Breath Collective. OBC explores the range of breathing through non-dogmatic principles, live experience, progressive education, and a global community. Simply put, OBC exists to share the power of breath to inspire the extraordinary. By using breathing as a tool, their students learn a quick and powerful way to unlock their true potential with the support of a global community for a complete life upgrade. I'd like to invite you to become a member of Our Breath Collective and begin building your intuitive breath toolkit through daily live guided breathing practices. Through 15 minutes a day, you can get the support you need in creating a consistent practice. Each session is recorded and saved in an on-demand library of over 250 practices, so you can always tap in when you need it most. This membership is something I participate in on a daily basis, and I'm so excited to share it with you because I can confidently say that this has changed my life. I can't imagine starting my day without breathwork and without the folks at OBC. Visit ourbreathcollective.com and use code DAN, D-A-N, at checkout for $10 off your first month. And now, enjoy the episode. Philipp, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. We were chatting a little bit before we hit record here, and I'm excited to learn about what we're going to be discussing today, which is quantum energy and quantum healing. And I was sharing with you that it is a new topic for me, and I think for a lot of my listeners, they may have some idea around energy and energy healing and quantum energy to an extent, but it's also still pretty new for a lot of people. So I'm excited for this conversation. I will be approaching it with awe and wonder and childlike curiosity, and just excited to hear more about your story and all things around quantum energy.
That sounds great. Yeah, thanks for that. And also thanks for everyone listening. Even if this is a new topic, maybe even more so, you'll be surprised what's hidden behind the curtains of that topic.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good analogy. So I would love to start with hearing more about your background. I understand you have background in corporate America, being an executive at T-Mobile, and I want to hear a little bit more on how you discovered all of this and started implementing it into your life, and eventually it became a huge part of your life and your career. So why don't you share a little bit more about that backstory?
Yeah, so indeed, I ended up in corporate Europe and then in corporate America. I was a vice president at T-Mobile in Europe, responsible for 14 countries, and then in the US as well, in several other executive positions. But while I was there, I felt the whole time, this is really not what I'm here for. And maybe some people can relate to that, even more so today, probably than several years ago. And anyway, already in the early 2000s, I started to get really curious and interested about what's really behind it. What's the truth, how deep can I go, and actually find what's behind the surface, this material world, right? So because we're kind of living in a very materially oriented world, right? So it's, most people identify just with their body, and they'll do their work in the mornings until the evening, drink a beer, surf a little bit, and then go to bed, and that's pretty much it. And you repeat and repeat that. It's really not, because there's so much more behind that. And I started to, at that time, read a little bit about meditation and yoga, and then actually started to do these things. Then I actually went to Thailand at some point and stayed. Was just traveling with a backpack. That was in between. I just took a whole month off and said, okay, I feel I need to do this. And in between, I actually stayed in a Buddhist monastery. Now, I'm not a Buddhist or anything, but I just felt called to do that. And there was just a whole lot of meditation that was going on, which tuned me into much more what's behind the physical. Then I started to actually go through some shamanic workshops and energy healing workshops, and got more and more into it. Then I met my wife in 2005. And for the listeners that have not heard about my wife, so my wife was born with the ability to see auras of people, and she never had lost this conscious connection to the divine, or however you want to call it. So she was always able to see the quote unquote unseen. Like if people would tell lies or something, she would always see that and know that. Like it was just because she could see the energy, right? As an example.
And this is an ability she's always had?
Yeah, so she never lost that, and she thankfully grew up in a family with a mother that was very, very supportive and pretty tuned in herself, because that actually, a lot of kids in very young age, actually, they still have this very strong connection, but then it goes away more and more as we grow up in this world, because parents may just say, what you're telling me is all BS, right? Just do something real, think something real, and what you're talking about is not real. So it's coming from the parents, then it's coming from the world in general, and the world is not focused on supporting that knowledge and that connection. The opposite is the case. It supports everything to be in the five senses only, and not in the broader expansion. So for her, that was different. So she never had a mother that told her to stop seeing these things, for example. Yeah. And so that was good. And then over time, she realized those abilities, and she built those out over time as well. And now she's been, since many years, she's consulting clients, business clients, and private clients all over the world. Since a very, very long time. And yeah, it's quite fascinating. Cool. So anyway, so that catapulted my efforts and my curiosity really into a whole nother level. And it was quite frustrating at some point in between, because while I was learning to open up to the unseen, if you will, there was just a whole lot I couldn't see and I couldn't perceive, and it was hard for me to perceive certain energies. I knew at that point already, that it's all true what's there, but I couldn't really access it. It was very difficult because I was so blocked off. I was more like the typical, that you grow up and you don't remember anything anymore about where you're from, who you really are in a deeper sense. So I had to work hard to get back into that. But and my wife would always see everything, right? So that was this frustration sometimes that I just
Right,
couldn't.
right.
But then I gave that up at some point, and I also realized that everyone has their own perception, right? So if someone says I can see things or see aura, doesn't necessarily mean that don't see it like you have this physical seeing. It's really your own perception, and yeah, then I got even more into past life regression work, for example. So I got trained myself in doing that with others and helping others. And yes, some more shamanic and energy practice workshops that I
Hmm.
went through. And yeah, at some point I actually arrived there as well, that I was able to see energy fields and could see underlying problems of people that you couldn't see just with your normal eyes, and you couldn't see it as a doctor either. You literally had to really tune in with the energy system of someone that then may ask the question, and then I was able to help transform blockages and things like that. Anyway, so that's kind of like the energy world, and then I had this corporate world that was kind of going on in parallel, and the issue though at the time was that now it may be a little bit different, right? Because really the world has changed quite a bit, and humans are changing. But at that time, this energy healing, or that there's even more than the five senses, is something you wouldn't talk about in the corporate world. It's just something that's not, it's yeah, it just doesn't really have a place there. There's actually a lot of executives that are very spiritual and very tuned in, but even they don't talk about it, and that's why you don't really hear about it. I think this will come out
Mhm.
more and more. But
Mhm.
for me, it started to become a stretch a little bit to sort of hide this part of me, which I knew was actually the essence of me. And in 2016, it was just final for me. I said, okay, so I've been in the corporate world for a long time. It's been great. I had a good time. I learned a lot, and but now it's the time to really do what I have in my heart, what is kind of my calling, and to be myself with all aspects at all times without having to hide anything of what I am, because that's really not the purpose why I'm here. And then since that time, I started to just follow my own impulses and create out of what I felt called to do. And so at some point I started a supplement company that is focused on carbon 60, which came out of a calling that's also still active. It's a small company. And then at some point, we got into this quantum energy technology. So we saw several different technologies out there. They were all extremely limited, though, or they had certain aspects that were actually on one end helping people, but on the other end really stressing people. And
Mhm.
then, thankfully, through all of my work in the past and how we lived our lives, we had gotten to know Roman Hafner, and Roman Hafner is from Europe, and they call him the Wunderkind there. In the US, he's not very well known because he doesn't speak English, so you wouldn't find any interviews really here, other than I interviewed him once. But in Europe, he's all over the place. Like, he's been on every podcast because
Mhm.
already as an 11-year-old, um, he would be on stage with 300 people that would ask him questions about their physical health and other problems, and he would always hit the nail on the head, because he was born similar like my wife, but in a much deeper way. He was born with the ability to see each and every frequency and vibration. Um, and he didn't have this physical seeing. So, like, I could see your microphone now and your head and all that. He couldn't see it that way, because he would see the vibration of all of it, and he would look at
Mhm.
you and he could see your heartbeat already as a little kid. So he had to
Wow.
really learn this physical seeing. And yeah, and then, realized that he could actually see these energies and vibrations of people or objects or animals also when he's just miles away. So you didn't have to be right in
Hmm.
front of him. And then already as an 11-year-old, he got really into this, and he got, help by his parents and some other people. And yeah, then he was hired by doctors, doctors that
Wow.
didn't know what to do with certain patients because they were like out treated, like they couldn't do anything with them anymore. Or sometimes someone would have something and they couldn't figure out what they had. So they called them up and said, "Hey, Roman, can you take a look?" And all that. So he's extremely special in the sense of granular viewing. So he can
Hmm.
literally, like, you can go into your living room and I could tell you, "Hey, there's this candle holder. Can you please pick it up and take it to the kitchen?" Very easy for you to do. But when I would tell you, "Okay, so in this soup of frequencies here right now, there's a specific EMF frequency. Could you please grab that and transform it?" Or there's a vitamin C frequency. Could you please locate that and then move that somewhere else? You'd be lost because you just couldn't do it. But you could if you were fully trained. So that's the thing. Like, we all have
Hmm.
these abilities, but we're not trained, right? You can't play tennis at Wimbledon if you've not trained, right? It's impossible. It's the
Yeah.
very same thing. So, but he
So
can
this
do
is a
this.
trainable. Sorry to interrupt you. This is a trainable ability.
Yes, everybody can do that, but I would say, with him, it's a natural talent. Like
It's
someone
a
like
natural talent.
Mozart,
Yeah.
for example, who is born and has this just amazing ability and talent and then there probably a lot of other people can train to be a good piano player and could maybe even write an opera, but they probably couldn't do it as well as he did. And
Yeah.
that's how I would explain
I'm,
it. But in theory, yes, we can all do a lot more than we think.
yeah. I'm trying to picture what that actually feels and looks like. Someone like myself, this is also new to me, and I don't have currently the ability to see, energetic fields and frequencies. When you start training in that way and you start actually gaining that ability to do it, what is that like when you go from it's almost like walking for the first time, like taking your first steps, as a baby, you don't know what it feels like to walk or to run, and then all of a sudden you can do it. Um, what is that? I know that's a loaded question and it's much more experiential and it's probably difficult to explain, but what is that like when you can actually start you actually gain that ability to see and operate with those different frequencies and fields?
Yeah. So I think one of the things actually that prevent us from there are two main things I think that prevent us from getting quicker into this ability is one is that the conditioning in the world is it's all around the five senses, and it's all around bad air, bad food, EMF, and all that. Those are all things that really kind of try to put us more into the box, if you will, in the box of the
Hmm.
five senses. And the other thing is our own fear. And yes, if you ask someone, "Hey, do you have any fear?" The instant reaction is, "No, no, I don't have any fears." But hey, if you dig deeper, there are fears, and one of the fears is that we have a lot more power than we think and that we allow, and getting into that is somewhat fearful because there's a lot of hidden stuff, and it can be traumatized from the childhood or past lives, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Could be some trauma, some bad experiences that we put away. And then there's another experience that is really bad. Maybe again as a child, you were, I don't know, there's something with the parents, something went really wrong, or you're just super curious as a little child and you wanted to do something and you're like, "This is awesome," and then there's, I don't know, your grandfather that's tell you, "No, you shouldn't do that." It's just for a little kid that's already a traumatic experience. So all these things and experiences we tend to bury, and then that
Hmm.
becomes kind of like a wall, and that's that wall between us and sensing more of what's out there. So we bury that. Now, if we want to access some of that power, that's also where we tend to go through some of those blockages that we've accumulated. And that's something where we try to not go because it hurts, or it can hurt, or we think it hurts. You know what I mean? But as you understand that if you can start going in and you can start to release some of that stuff, it's freeing. It's really freeing. And it opens up each time you do that a little bit more of your like transparency. Think of it as, you know, a window, and outside of it is the sun and blue sky, and the sun is shining through it, right? And you're just in the inside. But then the window gets darker and darker and more dusty because of all these blockages and traumas and whatever. Until at some point it's pretty dark inside because you just don't let that in. And then you can start wiping the window, you're cleaning it a little bit, and more comes in. And that's this transparency. And that's how you connect more really with your true inner power. And that's how all these abilities also can be activated. And, you know, that's just like one general way of looking at it. And then also it's actually in some ways not that hard, because I would bet that everyone listening is able to see some energies at least, or perceive it in some way. And you may not really think about it, but you probably have had the instance where you went into a restaurant somewhere, or maybe it was just a big party or something, and there are just maybe some tables with some people where you feel like, wow, you know, it's a nice energy, or, you know, this is a good vibration. You may have not thought that, but that's how it felt. And at the same time, maybe you start talking to a couple people where you feel like it's just odd, like it's, you know, we're not swimming on the same wave, if you will. That's energy, you know, and maybe even before you start talking, right? Because there's no words involved. It's not what they say. It's just there's something that's doesn't feel so right to you, and then something else feels right. That is energy, right? So that's in the simplest form. But then you can you can expand on that. But the key was really with Roman, who had already 11 years ago, he had created a so-called Y pyramid, which is basically like a quantum pyramid, which was an amazing tool. We worked with him together to really take that to the absolute next level. And so we created a technology that combines science and consciousness, if you will. So now we have a tool where some people say, well, this looks like magic, can't work. And science actually has trouble to explain scientifically what is the process that it actually works. So there are ways to explain that. It's still difficult, though. It's almost like you go to the 1600s, time travel right now, take an iPhone with you, iPhone 12, give it to someone there, and you know, that guy can play some games on it and whatever. It all works. But that guy wouldn't even have the vocabulary to explain how this thing works and what this even is, right? So it's then, you know, science plays catch up with these things. So we focused very early on actually showing what it does and having institutes and doctors' practices prove what it does. And we can get more into that. But that's kind of what came out of this whole story of really knowing both sides. And here we are.
I love it. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to hear more about your company, Lila Quantum Tech, and all of your products that you offer and what each one does. But just to touch back on, you were talking in the beginning of our conversation around, we live in a very material world, and oftentimes people think of the world that we see and live in and interact and work in. It's all physical and material. And I was just talking to somebody this morning, and we were talking about energy, and she said, everything is energy. And for those that are listening that they might seem a little skeptical on what Philipp and I are talking about right now, if you can come at this with the framework of everything in our universe, everything in our existence is energy, from the glass of water that I have here to the computer that you and I are speaking between, and the nature outside, our bodies, everything is nature, or excuse me, everything is energy. And when you start looking at it that way, then you can start seeing that it's not just a physical body. There's more there. There's real energy there. So with that being said, I do want to hear more about all of your products, but I think it would be really helpful to cover a little bit more around the idea of quantum energy. And we've covered, healing and energy. And can you explain a little bit more about that idea of quantum and how quantum energy plays into all of this?
Yes. And so, by the way, so when we talk about quantum energy, it could also be a different word, right? We chose that because it was the right words to choose, but it could also be ether energy, right? We felt like less people can resonate with that, but from the original concept, that would actually be even more true. But I'm saying that so people don't get hung up on certain words, because it's really what's behind the words and what does it do. So this quantum energy is an energy that we find in every cell. So each of your cell and my cells have a quantum energy field, and that's also how these cells communicate instantly and constantly. And that's pure quantum energy. Now we've been able to concentrate a pure quantum energy field in this technology that we have. I mean, I can show just one of these things. This is a big one. It's we don't even sell this here. This is you see these different plates, and it's concentrated in between those plates in a way where you can literally say that time and distance don't matter, and it's so concentrated that various things are suddenly possible. So I'll try to explain and it's very simple to use, actually. So it's not like something where you need to learn how to program something or use certain codes. No, it's simple. You can just have this sit in your home, and it has a certain radius. So this one here would have a radius of about 1 kilometer. It's pretty big. We have a so-called quantum block that has a radius of 145 feet, so it covers pretty much a whole home. And it neutralizes and harmonizes negative and harmful frequencies within this radius. And that includes EMF. I mean, a lot of people and your listeners probably have heard about EMF, which is, Wi-Fi, microwave radiation, 3G, 4G, 5G is in everyone's observation now. And these frequencies, as well as others, there are others that we don't really know about so much, can have a destructive effect on the physiological system of an animal, of a plant, and of humans as well, right? It's and now that comes in handy that I used to be a VP at T-Mobile, because I know both sides. And by the way, I'm not saying here it's just all bad, right? It's all negative. I'm not in that camp, because I see the benefits of it, right? Because there's a lot of convenience in it. There's a lot of great things that result from it. However, it can be very harmful, and we know that from thousands of studies out there that you will have a hard time finding any of those on Google, actually, but they are out there. And
I wonder why Google might want to hide a little bit of that.
I don't know that. But anyway, it's widely known. Everyone that has looked into it knows that. And then we've done our own studies, and actually, in these cases, we can say there's an absolute visible effects, whether you look at the heart rate variability, for example, that is directly connected to the autonomic nervous system, or you look at live blood. So there's something called dark field microscopy or live blood analysis. It's actually something that in the US is not so known, which is interesting. or it was interesting to me why it's not so widely known. Now I learned just actually a couple of weeks ago from a doctor that at some point certain authorities said, okay, so if any practitioner wants to use a dark field microscope for treatment purposes and diagnostics, they would have to purchase a license, which is $100,000.
Wow.
Hey, there's your reason. So actually, I haven't asked if it's 100,000 per year or if it's just a one-time license. But that's
my gosh! Either way, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's quite crazy. And so in Europe, it's pretty widely known. Actually, it I think originates out of Germany originally, and in Germany you'd find a lot of doctors that use that, because what you can do with it is you can take a blood sample and then you put it under this dark field microscope, and you can illuminate with it the blood cells. So you can literally see the blood cells, and you see it, live. You see how they're moving, and it's very clear what does healthy blood looks like. And now I haven't sent you any of those pictures, but if people go on the website, you can at least see a couple pictures on how healthy blood would look like and how it's not good. But you want to have these like the blood cells look round pretty much, and you want to have them ideally a little bit separated from each other, so that means they're not clotted. Now, if you introduce EMF, for example, a Wi-Fi or something, and you're not exposed before, then instantly you see the blood change. And literally, like in all of our studies, we see that in 100% of the cases, they start to clot. You have those so-called money rolls. And then once that happens, you're at higher risk of heart attack, heart disease, stroke, and all these things. And there's a lot of other factors that happen. White blood cells tend to get paralyzed. And white blood cells, for people that don't know that, if there's good white blood cell activity and motility, that means your immune system is ready to respond, ready to act, and in better shape. Whereas if you reduce that motility and activity by paralyzation, basically you're blocking the immune system or part of the immune system, right? So these are all like effects, and people and doctors can read a lot of these things out of it. You can't use it to say exactly, okay, now you have this disease, right? There are actually certain diseases I think experienced doctors can tell, but it's a great tool to look at overall health, for example, and to derive other conclusions. And it's great to see the effect of certain things like EMF. Like literally your blood is being impacted in a negative way. So what has then happened is that, in these studies, they would introduce our products, whether it's this capsule here that is something for on the go. It's charged with certain healing frequencies, and then with molecular frequencies of the most important vitamins and minerals for the human body. And then obviously it's charged with our technology with pure quantum energy. So it creates a field that has a positive impact and also, neutralizes EMF around you. But then also the actual technology. And then it get introduced, and you can see as it gets introduced, suddenly all the blood clotting goes away. And we've not only gone and had doctors do these tests, because you can also, we were extremely honest about it, because we didn't do any of those tests or studies ourselves. We literally gave our products to practitioners, doctors' offices, institutes, and said, hey, can you run a study on this and just find out more, and then give us the results. And even though we knew that it helps with all these things, it was always a moment of, you don't know what these studies will come back with, right? You don't know the people that are doing it and all that. But in each and every case, it came back as extremely positive and worked in 100% of the cases, which is quite significant, because something can already be great if it works 35% of the time, right? Why wouldn't you try that? But no, it worked all the time. And then I need to share this story because it's really interesting. There's a very experienced doctor here in the U.S., Dr. Beverly Rubik. People can look her up. And since 3 decades, she's been publishing peer-reviewed studies, and she's an absolute expert in designs of gold standard studies to prove and disprove effects of technologies, for example. And I had been sent a podcast interview with her at some point. I had never heard of her before, and she was talking about the effects of EMF on the blood, and that she did like extensive analyses on that, and that she was very concerned for the overall health of the people, and said, we need to do something, right? And then this guy sent me this, and then I had the impulse to reach out to her and said, Beverly, I heard your podcast and great interview and great work you're doing. We may have a solution for this. Are you interested in hearing more? And she said, yes, tell me more. So, I gave her access to the website, explained a little bit, and she said, well, this sounds really interesting, but I don't think it can work. Because she was not thinking that an energy device like that could actually make a difference. And then I said, well, why don't you look at these experiments and studies that we already have published here? And she looked at it, yeah, this is all very intriguing, looks good, but I'm still not convinced. And I said, okay, so what's missing? So what do you need to be convinced? And she said, I would run a randomized, sham-controlled, double-blind study and single-blind study, or both. And I would run it myself, because then I know it's like the whole study design, everything is like 100% gold standard. And then I said, okay, so what does it take? And then, a little bit money later, she designed the first study, and she said, we'll start only with 4 test persons, because she was still thinking she would blow our budget if we go too much and it doesn't work. I was like, okay, I'll follow your guidance, but we know it works. And she said, I'll see what comes out of the study. What happened is, in 100% of the cases, all these things happened. Stage 1, stage 2 of blood clotting was completely reversed in only 10 minutes of using our device.
Wow.
All the visibly negative effects of EMF that I just described a little bit were all completely reversed to 100% up to 200%. Why 200%? Because in some of the people, the blood looked actually even better than before the Wi-Fi got introduced, if that makes sense. So not only reversed in 10 minutes all the Wi-Fi effects, but it already helped reverse some of the other effects that people already came in with to begin with. And then she had an open mouth, and then I talked to her, and then the picture had changed. And she was like, oh my God, this is really working. You have a solution here. And this is one of the biggest problems right now in the world, is the blood clotting. Whether you look at this or you look at that, what they have in common, they all produce blood clotting and microblood clotting. Like, you have the solution here. This is amazing. And then I put on the brakes and said, well, honestly, this was a small study. By the way, I want to be very mindful about these things, because I'm not going to go out and say these things like publicly in a big forum before there's not like real evidence and proof. And I want to be very careful, because these topics, that I just didn't word, but those are very sensitive topics, right? I want to be mindful. And then she said, okay, so, we should do a follow-up study. We'll do more test persons now, so that we can see if it gets verified with statistical significance. We just got those results back 2 weeks ago, and it's amazing. Lily, again, 100% of the cases, and now with statistical significance, all these things that I just described happened again. And it's phenomenal. Now we do more research, more testing, but that was awesome, to see also someone that is very scientific, doesn't believe in this stuff really, but then sees, damn, this really works.
That's huge. That's a big turning point, or breakthrough with your technology, and helping further that advocacy for the benefits of it. And I had a chance to see some of those pictures that you're describing with the health of our blood. When you were on Dave Asprey's podcast, I watched that and saw the visuals of unhealthy blood. And then I think you said after 10 minutes of using the technology, the improvement in the health of our blood cells. And I'm a visual person, so seeing that was pretty eye-opening. I do want to talk a little bit about with EMFs. I have been big into grounding, like simply just going outside and no socks, no shoes, just have my bare feet on the ground. What would be the difference between grounding and nature in terms of mitigating some of the negative effects of EMFs? What would be the difference between grounding and then using the quantum technology?
So first of all, I think it's amazing that you do that, because going out in nature is something we've also kind of almost forgotten. Like, and now we're even more at home also in the last 2 years, we didn't really go out, but that's really where we charge our batteries, right? That's where we reload ourselves, and where you can wind down, and, all the stuff that's in our brains and all the worries, you start to just balance. And that's helpful. And there's lots of different ways on how you can do that. Now with this technology, you can take it up a notch, literally. So I would still go in nature, because, hey, isn't it always amazing if you go in a forest and you just, our technology does not and doesn't even try to
replicate that?
Yeah, exactly. Because, go out in nature, right? But hey, you can actually go out in nature and still use the technology, for example, because even in a forest, if it's in a city, you'll have EMF all around, for example. But so what the difference is really that this is a highly concentrated, pure quantum energy field, which is not earthbound. So it's not bound to Earth or to what's in the ground. It's literally beyond that, right? It's beyond the physical. It's beyond the matter, and with that, it's sort of what it does. It reminds your DNA. It's so we have this blueprint. That's maybe now a little bit too much for some of the audience, because you're just like hearing from Dan about this the first time. But it's like we have this blueprint of the optimal version of ourselves, if you will. That's how I would call this blueprint, right? And we're connected to that. And we kind of like, there's a constant like download happening. And through the DNA, actually that gets mirrored into our physical existence, right? So now when this connection is sort of, again, we're using this window example. If you think of the DNA as a crystalline structure and that's all dirty, all that information from your perfect or optimal blueprint can't really enter. So the technology helps with this connection. So it builds a much stronger connection. It helps with cleaning the window, if you will, so that your own information from your higher self, if you will, can come into you and express itself in a healthier way. And a healthier way is, it's not about just physical. It's really energetic. Your whole energy system sort of gets a boost and gets the opportunity to use that energy to change and transform certain things. And those can be on the energetic level, but they can be on the physical level as well. That's pretty much how it works, and it's very, very powerful. So it is indeed something different, and also you can use the technology for way more things. So I've just gone into this one thing, literally, right? Oh, well, sort of two things. You have it sit at your home, and it neutralizes all these frequencies that may be harmful. So what else can you do next? The test that I was talking about with the blood, that test was actually done with putting your hands inside, because if you're just in the field, it's still good, but you would have to wait for longer, not just 5 or 10 minutes. But if you put your hands in there, or your feet, doesn't matter, you also put your head in there, then it has this impact on the positive influence on the physical body, but also on the energetic system. And so that's kind of like the second thing you can use it for, like for your own good, if you will. The third thing is you can copy frequencies in it, because in this space in between the plates of this device that I showed earlier, if you put a piece of a healing plant in there and then a glass of water, within only seconds, that frequency of the healing plant will be also in the water. And you can do that with any object, frankly. So you could take an aluminum cart and put it in, also with a piece of a healing plant or whatever you want. It could be a vitamin C pill, and you transfer that frequency almost instantly. It just takes a few seconds, up to a minute in the weak version, and you have that frequency then in the cart. Or you could load it into this capsule where there are frequencies in here, and that's how you can leverage this. That's quite amazing, because I would call it modern homeopathy, right? So homeopathic medicine is widely known, of course. It's been proven to work a lot in Europe. It's widely used still today. Anyway, the process of the dilution and everything is quite a process, and probably most people wouldn't be able to do it. I've gone through that process myself, so I know actually how long it takes, how difficult it is, and what you have to all remember to actually have the right dilution and all that. And so with this, everybody can do it. It's so easy. It's simple. So we have a lot of people that in our community, users that build their own libraries of certain frequencies because they really work with them, or practitioners that want to support on an energetic level what they give to their patients on a physical level. So that's something you can do. And then you can charge any object with pure quantum energy. So you can basically imprint it. So if you look at this ring, for example, so if I put it in, that's a gold ring. Gold by itself is already amazing. And, just look at it and feel it, it's nice. But once you put it in, it's as if the qualities of it come out to its full potential, and it's gonna be energetically enhanced afterwards. So the vibration will be finer and higher. And for people that don't really perceive energy very well, even for them, they would say, well, this is more beautiful now. So because you really have before and after effects. And so those are some of the things you can do with it. And you can even do quantum entanglement. Now, I don't have to go into this one because maybe that is like for part 2 at some point, but we've also proven that. It's been proven multiple times, but it's now new that is something you can do with our devices as well. But just want to mention it at least as a little teaser.
Yeah. No, it's so fascinating. So when you're saying that the technology can enhance, you have a certain object that you put inside and enhances that object. Let's say it's our actual bodies. Is that now helping us with focus and energy and maybe reduce tiredness?
Yes. So what it does, it basically helps that you can come into full balance and full strength again, energetically, but also physically. So it's while miracles are possible, and we've seen miracles and heard miracles from customers, that doesn't necessarily happen, but it can accelerate everything on that journey quite significantly. And that's pretty much what it does. So because that's possible, you will pull in basically whatever is then needed to get rid of this anxiety overall, for example. And there can be multiple reasons for the anxiety. And it doesn't need to be anxiety. I mean, we've heard from several people with chronic Lyme disease, for example, that they just, had this terrible fatigue and everything. And, almost lost the will to live, because it's just, everything is such an effort. And now they have that technology and use it. They're saying all my fatigue is gone. I feel energetic again. I feel joy again to go out and do stuff. And that's quite amazing, frankly, to hear these things. Now, we don't go out and say, this can help you with Lyme disease, because we wouldn't do that, because these are anecdotal testimonials that I'm saying here now with that. And what we always do in the next step, once we hear more and more of that, and chronic Lyme disease or Lyme disease is one of those topics, actually, we're following up with a study. So a study is actually planned. We were already going to start with it this last year, but it's going to start this year. Same with autistic kids. There were several people in our group. We have a user group, just for the people to know. It's almost like 2,500, 2,600 users by now on Telegram. It's a private group. And people were reporting, it helps with our autistic kids. And one autistic kid was always treated. It's not a medical device, by the way, and we don't want it to be a medical device at all. But it was used on Mondays to help this kid. The kid didn't know that anything was going on. And Mondays used to be the worst day of that kid, because that kid always had someone evaluating that kid throughout the day, every day, with certain aspects. That's how some people do that. And now Mondays became the best day in all of the ratings. And then they reported them. We heard it from someone else. And then someone in the group from India, a doctor who runs a clinic there, also heard that. And they have a large program with autistic kids where they help autistic kids. And he then reached out and said, we want to run a study. We've heard all these things, and this sounds great. We want to run a study, a real clinical study. Can you support us with devices, right? And we said, absolutely, because we're a small company and we can't run all these studies simultaneously. And it's very expensive also and time intensive. So it's great if someone reaches out and says, we're going to run the study. We just provide basically the technology. Great. And so this study has been going on for, I think, 5 months now. And it's going to continue for another 2 months. And just at halftime already, they sent us a halftime report and said that 70% of the kids showed significant improvements, and the other 30% showed improvements. So, and those significant improvements were quite dramatic, and they were. All of them showed improvement in speaking, which for the parents is just an amazing thing, because usually they have real trouble speaking at all. So they had improvements in speaking. They had improvement in attention span. They had improvement in bowel movement and all those things. And yeah, so that's what we try to do. At that time, we could say, okay, we had a few people that reported positive results, but hey, there needs to be a real study so that we can actually then talk about it. And that's kind of what we do. But the technology it's new. There's still a lot to discover. And that's also, I think, why this Telegram group is just so full of curiosity and high energy and vibes, because everyone in the community is kind of like, can experiment with the technology, right? Because it's not us keeping it for ourselves. It's decentralized. Like, people can use it, not for commercial purposes. If you want to, you can also do that. But then, we would set up a commercial license agreement. But other than that, for yourself and your own curiosity, you can try. And people come up with new stuff like almost every day. And they help their plants grow or help their dogs and their cats. And it's fun. It's fun, and it's touching at the same time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's got to be so cool for you to hear so many stories from different people on how it is impacting people's lives and making a real change and helping people that need it. So that's got to be really cool for you to see that and hear all those stories.
Yeah.
I do want to cover one last topic in terms of some of the benefits that this technology has. I have a note here that it can help with our food and water in terms of intensifying the taste of our food and even extending the shelf life of our food. I actually had COVID like a month ago, and I lost my sense of taste and smell. So I'm super interested in this concept of intensifying the taste of food, because there are certain foods that I'm still not quite tasting properly. So can you share a little bit more about how this technology can affect our food and our water?
Yeah. So first of all, with you having lost that ability a little bit to taste, I would rather use the technology, with putting hands in, putting feet in and stuff like that, to just bring that full power and that original sensing, smelling, and tasting back to, to help your body to basically. So what happens is the body can heal itself, right? So because we also don't say our technology like heals anything, right? Full disclaimer here, but it,
Mhm.
it helps the body to come into this position again to heal itself. And that's what would happen, because, naturally your body is not tasteless or senseless, right? You can taste, so that you can signal that it comes back. But you can charge indeed water. And maybe people have heard about the Emoto Institute in Japan. So Emoto is actually a pretty famous guy. So he was the first one that actually proved that you can change the energy in water. And they were able to visualize it because they froze water, and they had a technology where they could visualize the crystals in water. And they could literally show that with certain words, even like hate and love, it would make a difference to the energy in the water. So they tested our technology. And so they tested water before, and then they tested water after it was charged in our water bottle for 25 minutes or for 3 minutes in this quantum block. And they had never seen anything that was able to change water positively in such a short time frame like the quantum block did. Now they actually want to bring our technology to Japan. That's how impressed they were. And they've been doing this for decades. So yeah, you can structure water. You put a glass of water in it and you structure it. It's an energetically optimized water. It doesn't filter out anything. So you don't go to the Mississippi River and just take a glass, put it in here and think it's going to be great to drink. No, you'll have mud in there. You'll have other stuff in there. You want to use filtered water. Or something like Fiji water. It's just water that's already good to begin with. You can enhance it in there, and you can do the same thing with any other beverage. Frankly, orange juice, tea, whatever you put in, and then pretty much the same is true with other groceries, whether it's nuts, for example, or fruits, vegetables, especially those that goes really, really quickly because they're filled with a lot of water content as well. And yeah, so we have people that even have done taste tests. They take a bunch of raspberries and they put some aside, and then they take the other raspberries and put them in the block and charge them, and then there's some more intense taste. I wouldn't call this a scientific study because there was no scientific study around this. This is also anecdotes, and reports from people. I've witnessed that myself. But there's stuff happening indeed when you charge food. And one thing is very interesting. You find it actually on our YouTube channel. At the biohacking conference, the Bulletproof Biohacking Conference by Dave Asprey in Orlando, I was speaking, and I was basically introducing the science and the scientific studies around this technology. And we were thinking beforehand, well, again, this is, we talk a lot about this, but especially in today's world, you hear a lot about studies, right? So could we do something in front of 100 people on stage live that where they could see with their own eyes that there's a difference? And then we had heard from biohacker Todd, who's a famous biohacker. I think he has several biohacking groups on Facebook with like 40, 50,000 people in it and all that. And he's been using our technology quite a bit. And he's very allergic to honey, to avocado, and to crab meat. So he's a biohacker enough, though, to test. And so he put, and we didn't tell him that at all. Like he did that. And then he told us. He put these substances in the block, charged them, and then ate them. And each time he did that, he tolerated them with no problem, no allergic reaction whatsoever. And then he thought, well, maybe the allergy is completely gone now. But no. Then he took the regular honey that was not charged, etc., and he would get a allergic reaction. It was quite bad then because he has heavy allergic reaction. Nothing deadly or anything, but quite painful. So then Ian Mitchell, who's a scientist, he said, well, this we could just replicate on stage, just in a different way. We use a derma roller and just, like you do the usual allergy test. And then live on stage, they took crab meat and basically put it in the skin, and then waited, and it was a clear reaction. So it started to swell, it started to have these bumps and everything. And then this very same crab meat live on stage, they put in our so-called infinity block, I think for 6 minutes. And then they took this very same crab meat out and did the very same thing on the other arm. No reaction. All you could see was just where they put the needle in. Of course, that spot was red because that's where you put the crab meat in with the needle. But there was no allergic reaction. And then people came, obviously, and looked at it, and it's phenomenal. We don't recommend anyone do that, please, okay? So that's really on everyone's own risk, because this is, again, something we've heard it from many people, and Todd can replicate it over and over again like this. So there is something happening with this. We don't feel comfortable to tell anyone, yes, it works for everyone and with every substance. We just simply don't know. There's a lot more research that needs to be done. But it's kind of a cool thing, yeah.
It's fascinating. Yeah, and it's such a good example, a practical, tangible example for anyone that is looking at this and saying, all right, I don't believe this. There's some real, evidence, and a lot of people are evidence-based people, and they need to see it with their own eyes. So that's cool. It's a great story. Awesome, Philip. Before I get to my last question for you, where can people find you online, your website, your socials?
Yeah, so the website is leelaq.com, leelaq.com. Certainly that's a place to go. And then, the Telegram group I mentioned, if anybody is just truly interested in this topic and maybe learning more, hearing from other people about it, I'll share the invite link with you so you can put it in the show notes. Because again, you can't find it on Telegram because it's a private group and we want to keep it that way. But certainly if anyone is truly interested, feel free to join. It's a fun group of people, and you don't even have to be active there. You can just listen in and maybe learn more about the topic. And you can find me there as well, by the way. So, and then you can click on my icon and even private message me. It may take 4 or 5 days until I respond, but I do respond to everyone.
Cool. I love it. That's really helpful. And I'll have that all linked up in our show notes and video description. So my last question for you, Philip, is what excites you most about doing all of this, and where do you see this technology heading and the impact that it can have moving forward?
Great question. So, well, everything we talked about is just by itself already very exciting. And if you hear these positive stories about people getting better with certain things or overcoming these things, that's all great. But for me, honestly, the most exciting is that people start to connect more with their inner power and their true self through this technology, because the technology helps with that. And by using the technology, you get more into that, because you'll start like the water testing. You put some water in, or the raspberries, you do this. So you fine tune your senses, and people start to, because as you're using this, or hearing from other people that this really works, a shift is happening, because it's something that you didn't believe could be possible, or that there is more than, what we thought. And that alone is something where you start to open up, and you open up literally to yourself and to your inner consciousness and to your inner power. And I see that all the time. In this Telegram group also, we see people that connect more with themselves. And that is joy. That is pure joy to witness that, because we live in this time right now on Earth where this is anyway happening. And it's wonderful. And the more people, can connect really with themselves again, the better the world will become. And then we can live more from the heart also, rather than, just from our brains. And that's for me the real bliss in all this.
Yes, it's super exciting. And I hear people often talk about the old world and the new world. And it seems like we're going through so much transformation right now. And it's exciting to see so many people, myself included, that if I were to have this conversation a year or two ago, I'd be sitting here saying, bullshit. And now that, I've had some exposure to these types of conversations and these topics. And I don't know, I am no expert, but I am absolutely fascinated by it. And I'm intrigued. And back to what we were talking about in the beginning, that curiosity and that awe and wonder, I'm seeing that from more and more people, and it seems really promising. And I'm sure you're excited to see that same excitement in your field.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for the words also. And frankly, the same with me, right? Maybe I would have to turn the clock back 20 or 21 years, but I would have also said, no way, none of that can be possible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such an interesting, just one final note, that's such an interesting word, is possible or impossible. The longer I'm living and the more I'm learning and discovering and having conversations with people like yourself and others, is we don't even know what's possible. We're just starting to scratch the surface on what is possible in our universe. And it's fascinating and exciting all at the same time.
We're conscious beings that are having a physical experience. Just if you try to remind yourself once a day only about that, already certain things start shifting. And
Totally.
we don't have to fully understand it at first, so don't even bother or try, because it just comes over time.
Right. So true. Awesome. Well, Philip, thank you for all of your work and sharing everything that you've shared with us today. Appreciate your time and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much for having me on. Thanks to the listeners, and everyone have a blessed week.